Today we're going to be looking at the Sigma FP and comparing it to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera OG, which I've had for quite some time and has sort of been my favorite everyday carry for the last year or so. Recently picked up the Sigma FP and was really happy with the image quality that's coming out of the FP. Its form factor is also a very interesting form factor, so I thought a good comparison I haven't really seen online before is the Sigma FP comparing to the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera OG. So those two cameras are known for their pocketability. The OG Pocket Cinema Camera was the original cinema camera format that was truly pocketable. In fact, the OG was probably the only one of the Blackmagic Pocket lineup that is actually literally pocketable. The Sigma FP has taken that form factor to the next level with a camera body that has a full frame 35mm sensor, the ability to record internal 1080p 12-bit cinema DNG RAW, which is the same codec used in Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera OG, which also films at 1080p in 12-bit cinema DNG internally. The FP has the additional ability to film in 4K cinema DNG 12-bit as well. That can only be done with an external solid-state drive attached to the USB-C port. So I also have the rig that's capable of recording 12-bit 4K RAW. But today I thought it would be an interesting discussion just to talk about the two cameras and their capabilities with 1080p onboard, recording to SD cards, so a little less expensive media, and how those images compare. And primarily what I'm interested in is the form factor, the ergonomics as an everyday carry walk-around camera. So let's get right into it. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera OG has been my go-to everyday carry camera for the last over a year. I've wanted that camera for many years and had thought very seriously about purchasing it in around 2014 when Julia and I were shooting her web series that she did as a young girl. We did like about 100 episodes, and we predominantly ended up using two Panasonic GH2s with the customized firmware. I believe we were using driftwood. But at the time that we got the GH2s, I was looking and considering also the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema cameras. The problem at the time, and I think I've mentioned this in another video, was that I wasn't really happy with the idea of having to color grade the footage. And I mean, that's one of the big draws to the Pocket Cinema camera at the time, was a really low contrast flat log output in RAW. But at the time we were doing multi-camera setups and I just didn't want to have to grade. Editing was enough work. I kind of bypassed the OG at that point, although I was really interested in it and I loved the image that it could create. We ended up going with the GH2s. Then fast forward to about a year or maybe a year and a half ago, I saw an OG come up on Marketplace with the EF speed booster specific to the OG, which is a 0.58 times Metabone speed booster. It was a good deal at the time. I think I paid about 850 Canadian dollars. And yeah, that's been sort of my go-to walk-around camera for the last year or so. And that's right here. In this form factor here, I've got the Lumix 20mm, I think it's a F1.7 prime lens on it, very small form factor, very pocketable. And what I often will walk around and use with it is the 12 to 35 f2.8 stabilized Lumix lens, which is a fantastic pairing with this. Not quite as pocketable with that lens on it, but still just a fantastic pairing. Gives you a really nice focal range of about roughly 35 to 100 mil. So it's a good range as a walk around lens, or actually for multiple purposes. You can shoot short films with that lens as well. It's got really good optics, very sharp, and renders really well with the Blackmagic tiny little 16 mil sensor. And that's one of the issues with the Pocket, and one of the features of the Pocket is that it has this really tiny sensor. You see it here. It's like a tiny little thing, 16 millimeter, Super 16 size sensor, which is great, and it gives really good depth of field. And I know everybody wants the shallow depth of field, but typically historically cinema has been less known for its shallow depth of field and more for capturing more of the depth of the frame. In fact, one could argue that the whole job of the cinematographer is to build depth into the frame, and using depth of field, in this case like a deep depth of field that the 16 millimeter Super 16 sensor has, really allows for what would be classically considered a cinematic look. So in the Sigma FP, what we have is full frame sensor, which there you get the really great shallow depth of field. As sort of point towards shallow depth of field, I'm shooting right now on the Komodo 6K OG with a manual focus Nikkor 85mm F1.4 lens, and the depth is very shallow. And the only way I'm able to do that is with the monitoring app and a little wireless focus wheel. But that's the great thing about, for example, the Komodo, not to get off topic, but the ability to monitor and control it using the app allows you to use manual focus lenses even on shoot situations like this where I'm shooting myself and solo operating. So now going to the Sigma FP with the full frame sensor. Here we have the Sigma FP. That's the huge full frame sensor. And then I have the EF to L adapter on here. And then sort of to replicate what we had with the OG, I have the Sigma here with the 40 millimeter. It's not exactly the same field of view as the 20 is on the OG, but similar. The 20 mil on the OG would be more like 55 mil, 58 mil, something to that effect. One of the big benefits of the Sigma is that using vintage glass, and I think I've talked about this on a lot of my videos, I own a lot of vintage glass. All of these lenses on the Sigma FP will translate exactly to the focal range that they were intended on 35 millimeter film. So in other words, if I'm using like a, say for example, a 20 millimeter lens, which I've got the 20 millimeter here, the Lumix 20 millimeter here on the OG, well yeah, that translates into the field of view of like almost a 60 mil, like a 58 or something to that effect. But if I put that 20 millimeter lens, like a Nikkor 3.5, onto the Sigma FP, it's a wide lens. It's a 20 millimeter lens. Of course, they're always going to be a 20 millimeter lens. It's going to have all the same characteristics, but the field of view that you're getting is also wide, not just the distortion and the effect of the 20 mil. So that's a really big benefit of the Sigma FP. The lensing is just so much easier. Now, with the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera OG, I've rectified that by buying cinema lenses. So I have a couple different sets of cinema lenses, but I have a couple of sets of Micro Four Thirds cinema lenses for the OG, but those focal lengths are very small. So like, for example, I have like an 8, a 12, and a 16 Micro cinema lens. And those are beautiful, but translate into roughly 24, 35, and 50 mil, right? So a good range of lensing, but all of them are what would be considered ultra wide. So they don't have the same kind of characteristics of longer lenses. And longer lenses tend to be more pleasing to the eye, especially when it comes to the human face. So if you use a longer lens, like in the 80, like for example, the 85 millimeter, or even like the 55 millimeter, which is somewhat different than even the 50 millimeter, it's much more pleasing to the eye. There's less distortion on the face. You don't have as long of features, and depending on how you shoot too, like if you get really close up with a wide lens, you'll get a very distorted view. And on the face, that can be used for effect, but it's not as pleasing as a longer lens. And that's why longer lenses are typically used for portrait shooting. And in addition to that, it's one of the reasons why Super 35 lenses differ. So Super 35, traditionally, most cinema the past 60 years been shot on 3-perf or 4-perf 35 millimeter film stock, which is Super 35, which roughly translates to an APS-C sensor size. The lenses that you'll find for Super 35 cinema cameras are different focal lengths than you would typically see for film cameras. You'll have wider options for cinema glass than you would typically have for stills photo cameras of the same era, right? Because the Super 35 format was a smaller sensor and therefore needed wider glass in order to achieve the same field of view. All that to say, basically the Sigma FP has that big advantage of inexpensive, beautiful lens options for both cinema and for stills shooting. And although the stills mode of the Sigma FP is not bad, it's decent. It doesn't have a mechanical shutter. You can't do strobe photography. It just doesn't work for that. It's not great for like night photography with point light sources that can band. It's not as great for if you were looking for like a combination do-it-all hybrid camera. It might work for you, the Sigma FP. The Pocket OG is not going to be at all useful for that because it's not a stills camera. It just shoots cinema. The Sigma FP, you could get away with it if you're shooting predominantly daylight scenes, certain types of street photography. I could see you getting away with using the Sigma FP, but you could certainly get away with the FP as a primary camera for, say, a travel camera if you want to keep it really small and really light but get very good video, especially if you're highly video centric. So what's my takeaway from the Sigma FP and the I should show them like side by side as well, just to get like an idea. It's kind of tough here, but just to see like the different form factors of the two. Pretty similar, you know, like I've got the hand grip on the Sigma as well, so it's not a perfect comparison, but overall very similar. And my takeaway from the two of them, would I sell? I guess what it comes down to is, am I going to sell the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera OG and just keep the FP? At this stage right now, I don't know if I would. And here's the reasons why. Number one, I have less money invested in the Blackmagic. Well, okay, I should clarify. I have more in a sense, more invested in the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema OG because I have a bunch of lenses for it that are specific to the M43 and Micro Four Thirds ecosystem that I can't really use for any other camera. Because of that, I am more inclined to keep the OG. If I was going to sell one of them, I probably in that case might consider the FP. With the FP, I love it and it's great, but I have a lot of options. So I have the FX30, which is also not a bad walk around camera and fills a lot of the same roles of the FP. But in addition to that, it's easy to control with the app. It has great autofocus. It has a lot of other features that I wouldn't really want to get rid of. I think I'd lean still a little bit towards the Blackmagic OG. Now, if it was your only cinema camera, and let's just say your only cinema camera, maybe you have another stills camera, because with the OG you would need another stills camera. But if it was your only cinema camera that you had, then I might be more inclined to keep the FP. Because the FP does tick a lot more boxes. That larger sensor, which is technically a little bit better in low light. It is a beautiful image. Both of them shoot beautiful images. If I was gonna go on like a once in a lifetime trip and I was looking at something very video centric to carry around, and say for example, like my kind of use case with like a Ricoh GR3 as like sort of a street camera to carry as well. Although with the Sigma, I think you could get away with just having that. Just the Sigma FP. Like if I was going to go to Vietnam again for a trip, which we will be going soon, would I just maybe take the FP? That could be a good choice, right? So I'm not going to say outright that I would choose the OG over the FP, but because I have so many different options, like I have the Komodo, I have the Canon R5, FX30, I have another camera coming soon that I'll be talking about. I'm very excited about getting. That's only a cinema camera. So, and then I have the FS700. So I have a lot of different cameras. But right now, yeah, no, I'm happy to have both of them. I'd like to see what it would look like to do a short film using just the Sigma FP and the OG together and cutting the film, because I think it would look really good together. The formats look really great. Maybe even just shoot it in 1080p, because honestly, the 1080p that comes out of both of these cameras is really nice. Both of them are fantastic cameras. I'm not going to tell you which camera to buy. If you're going at it, like I said before, and you're just looking for an everything walk around camera, then probably the FP is the only one that would really make sense for that. If you're looking just for another little cinema camera that's very pocketable, a lot of fun to use, very simple, the OG still has a place. And a lot of people have told me they'll never sell their OGs because they don't want to go without it anymore. And I'm kind of in that boat too. I don't know if I'd ever sell it. Anyways, that's my video for today. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great day. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks.